the chemical changes unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of these individual parts, starting off with acids and bases. You need to know what a strong acid is and what a weak acid is. And basically a strong acid could be something like hydrochloric acid, and a weak acid could be something like citric acid. And the big difference between them is the fact that a strong acid is fully ionised. Where what you've got is you've got lots of H pluses, where a weak acid will have less. You need to know about alkali and bases. This is then, an alkali is then something that then has OH minuses, which then counteracts with those, the H pluses. And an alkali is a soluble base. And then what a base is something that will absorb, take in H plus ions. So it doesn't necessarily have to have the OH minus. You need to know about neutral, and you need to also know about the pH scale. So the pH scale pretty much goes from pH 0 up to pH 14, and 7 is neutral in the middle, right? And every single time it goes from 7 to 6 to 5 to 4, right, what happens is it's 10 times more H plus ions. Reactivity series. Usually it starts at potassium and ends in something like gold. You need to know the reactivity series. Now the vast majority of the elements on the reactivity series are metals. Now there is also hydrogen and carbon in there, right? And basically when we're talking about extraction, anything above carbon cannot be extracted by carbon, so potassium cannot be extracted by carbon. Anything below it, in theory, can be. Reactions of acids. Right, now this is quite sort of heavy chemistry, right? So what you've got is you've got 4 reactions that you need to know about. You need to know what happens when you react an acid and a metal. You need to know what actually gets made in it. You need to know what happens when you have an acid plus a metal oxide. You then need to know what is actually made. You need to know what happens when you react an acid with an alkali. And the last one is you need to know what happens when you have an acid and a metal carbonate. So what they could do is, in your exam, they could write down the name of an acid, they could write down the name of a metal, and what they would do is they would ask you what is made on this side. Right, so you need to know the kind of the products of each one of these 4 reactions. Electrolysis. So electrolysis, right, if I just draw it kind of really, really briefly up here, what you have is you tend to have a beaker, you've got a couple of electrodes that go into it, you've then got some form of liquid, right, and then what they are is they're then connected up. That could be positive, that could be negative, right? That is then your electrolysis. You need to know what happens in a number of different versions of electrolysis, right? If it's molten, if there is a solution, you also need to understand about how reactive different metals can be. And there is then a couple of little acronyms, right, that come into it, which is oil rig, which is oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. We've got panic, positive anode, that's that. Negative is cathode, so that's the cathode and that's the anode. The reactivity of metals is all to do with the extraction. So where we talked over here about the reactivity series, anything above carbon is then extracted using electrolysis. In this as well, you need to know half equations. Now at the bottom here, I've then just put down acronyms, even though we've mentioned 2 of them up here. Oil rig helps. Panic helps. And then we've also got redox, which is what a lot of reactions are, where they're reduction and oxidation. There's also a nice little poem that's got stuff to do with zebras in it that you need to look up for the reactivity series.